Oh, good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and others. Yes. You know who you are. Yeah. I want to talk briefly about the political spectrum, left wing and right wing. And where does everybody fit on that? Well, I'm going to briefly hit on American politics first. The current American president, Joseph Biden, is a right-wing authoritarian. He is not a left-wing. He is not a liberal. He is not a progressive. He is a right-wing conservative authoritarian. He's not as severe as his immediate predecessor, the dumpster fire himself, who was basically a screaming fascist. Yeah. Before him, Barack Obama was also a conservative authoritarian on the right, the authoritarian right. Before him, Bush, even more extremely authoritarian right. Before him, Clinton, still severe authoritarian right. Bush the Elder, extreme authoritarian, far right. Reagan, the furthest authoritarian right conservative that America had ever had at that time, although since then American politics has shifted much, much further. Their Overton window has slewed so far to the right that, yeah, they're actually able to look at Ronald Reagan's policies and think, that's leftism, that's liberalism, as though the two concepts were the same thing. The last left-wing president the Americans had was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was an actual socialist. He was a liberal socialist, a moderate, anti-authoritarian liberal socialist. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the last liberal president you had was Jimmy Carter. He was a liberal. He was a capitalist, but he was a liberal. Before him, Nixon was actually slightly to the left of batshit crazy right wing. In many areas, he was progressive. He was an old-style conservative who, at the same time, wanted to do the right thing for the majority of people. And before him, Kennedy had been, dare I say it, a liberal, although Johnson had been an arch-conservative. Yeah, that used to be a thing. Democrats, when they ran a liberal or a progressive, they always had him run with an arch-conservative running mate so that they could get the Southern vote. Yeah. Reagan didn't have to run with an arch-conservative running mate. He just flat out went full Confederate. That's how he got elected. He just went full Confederate. He put the entire American Republican Party on Confederate States of America policy. And the Republicans have been exclusively batshit reactionary authoritarians ever since. And the American political spectrum is shifted so far to the right and so far into the authoritarian that, yeah, you're able to look at a right-wing conservative like Joe Biden and say he's a leftist. No, he's not. He is a right-winger. He is a conservative. He's also a devout Christian. He's a bigot. He's a capitalist. The last time the Republicans fielded a liberal was Eisenhower. And the last time they fielded what could be called a progressive conservative was Nixon. And the last time the Democrats fielded a liberal was Carter. Who was a capitalist but believed that capitalism could be a force of good in the world if you just put a few restrictions on it. Just a few restrictions. Because that's the liberal position. Capitalism with a few restrictions to keep it from becoming a rapacious monster. Putting a leash on the vicious dog so it doesn't attack everybody in the room, basically. Yeah. And the liberals have been putting a leash on the vicious dog of capitalism ever since. Here in Canada, we have a Liberal Party and a Conservative Party. But again, the political spectrum has been skewed so badly that the Liberal Party is fielding people who can best be described as old conservative. Justin Trudeau, while he may have the liberal penchant for good taste in clothing, good taste in food, good taste in music and art, he is an articulate, well-educated, intelligent person, but he is also a conservative. He is a staunch believer in unrestricted capitalism. He is a little bit of a reactionary. He's not a liberal by any stretch of the imagination, except superficially. He is a liberal shirt on a conservative heart. And the Conservative Party of Canada have long since ceased to be conservatives, having instead made themselves a suburb of the American Republican Party, who, as I have said, have moved so far into batshit authoritarian right wing that they ain't never coming back. They ain't never coming back to reality. And the Canadian Conservative Party have become pretty much the same thing. Extremely authoritarian, extremely far right, extremely hateful, bigoted, and nasty. And yes, the Canadian Conservative Party see themselves not as Canadians, but as Americans. Failed Americans, as they see all of Canada as just an ongoing failure to be American. Can somebody please tell me how this is not disturbing? Please, I'd like to know. Yeah. So America and Canada have seen an extreme shift to authoritarian right wing in all their mainstream politics. Britain has seen the same thing. Their Labour Party is now the moderate conservatives and the liberals of the past, while everybody else in Britain has gone so far into batshit crazy right wing that, yeah, they're one step removed from screaming, "Heil Thatcher! Heil Thatcher! Heil Thatcher!" Yeah. Yeah. And yes, the degree of political necrophilia there makes the politics of Argentina seem downright sane. Yeah. France has elected their first openly fascist president. Germany has elected moderate fascists. Yes, that does exist. It's still extremely right-wing, extremely authoritarian, but yeah. They don't wear jackboots. They wear white gloves and not jackboots. Yeah. So many countries in Europe are electing fascists and proto-fascists and neo-fascists and wannabe fascists. And not just in Europe, but in Asia. Fascism is incredibly popular. Pardon me. Fascism by any other name among governments who insist that anything to the left of batshit crazy is communism. I think the saddest and scariest version of this is in China, where they've gone from the Maoist left-wing authoritarianism that Mao Zedong acquired during his visit to the Soviet Union and his meetings with Joseph Stalin. They've gone from him to, yes, I will say this, right-wing capitalism. China is a capitalist country, and when capitalism breaks out the jackboots, it becomes fascism. China may be about to become expansionist for the first time in its history. Because fascism must be expansionist. There's always an element of reclaiming the old empire. The lands we used to have before the lesser people took them from our ancestors, when our ancestors were a bunch of namby-pamby liberals. Yeah. And now we're going to take it all back. Yeah. Capitalism is a disease. And unfortunately, we don't have any liberals to impose moderating regulation upon it. So what do we have? A world in which the majority of so-called left-wing parties are in fact far right, or at least moderate right. Yeah. The liberals are Joe Clark conservatives with good hair, and the conservatives are just batshit crazy screaming fascists. And yes, I know what the word fascist means. And that's the sad and scary part, is most people who embrace fascism have no idea what it means, what the word means, what the implications are. They just know that they're being promised the return of former greatness. The return to traditional values that made us great back when we stomped on those other dirty, inferior people who have since taken over and are polluting our streets with their mere presence. Yeah. That is fascism. And that is what the American Republicans, the Canadian Conservatives, the British Conservatives, and so many other conservative parties have become. Screaming fascists. Yeah. Anyways, that's enough depression for one morning. I'm going to go cheer myself up by going for a walk in the woods. Anybody want to come with me? Let's go for a walk in the woods. It'll be fun. All right. Ta-ta, folks.